You'll hear this music tomorrow at 3:30 as well. We're going live to Seattle.
Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. It is the Jeff Santos Show. 772-925-8206, the phone number to join us. Going to be talking with our great friend from the Pacific Northwest. Today is, of course, Tuesday, and we always talk to our great friend, the great independent journalist, and it was in Philadelphia with us, but he was doing some of the great work that a lot of journalists don't get out into the streets and talk to the protesters and the people who are outside protesting Hillary Clinton. Our good friend Mark Taylor-Canfield, of course, is with us. Mark, great to have you with us. We will play your theme song music at the end of this segment. My apologies, my friend. How are you?
Great, Jeff. Actually, we're getting ready for my neighborhood block party today, so I'm going to be the DJ, so DJ MTC is in the house. And I'll be
in the house. All right.
In the house, or in the street, actually. It'll be a street party. It's part of the national night out that's going on all across the country, where folks are getting together in their communities, having little street parties. This is thanks to the Cascade Community Council, which puts this together, and a bunch of local businesses are helping co-sponsor it. But I'll be performing some live music with some Seattle friends, as well as DJing, and then I'm also writing my column today at the Capitol Hill Times about these 37 Berniecrats running for office in Washington State's local primaries today. By the way, folks in Washington, you have to get your ballots postmarked today if you want to have them count for this primary. And I've been playing a lot of music gigs, and I'll also be on stage at the world's largest cannabis festival later this month at Seattle Hemp Fest. So busy time.
Well, Mark, we never get a chance to get together, which is a shame. Both in the great city of brotherly love in Philadelphia, and you were outside and I was inside. And believe me, it wasn't all that great with the sweat box that we inherited there. But let me ask you what you came away from in terms of Bernie supporters and what they are likely to do. We're looking to talk to one of Bernie's former surrogates, now a Jill Stein supporter, Dr. Cornel West, over the next week or so. And I'm going to ask him, similar to what I'm going to ask you, is what are you seeing in terms of Bernie bros, in terms of Bernie supporters, and their mixed feelings about whether to go to Jill Stein or whether to go to Hillary Clinton or write in Bernie Sanders, or even, I guess, in some cases, go to Donald Trump, although the numbers there seem to be very few and far between. Maybe some of the more rural votes in middle America, maybe more Trump potential, but I don't think many of the Bernie supporters in New England or in the Pacific Northwest or California are headed to Trump. But what are your thoughts coming out of Philly?
I have a lot of thoughts. The first thought is the city of brotherly love did not show a lot of love for the Bernie Sanders delegates or the Berniecrats or the protesters in the street. So I just have to start right there.
Okay.
And
I can tell you inside I agree with you, because I mean that Nina Turner and everything else was really bad news. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's true. A lot of the comments I've heard and what I've been tweeting and other people have been tweeting, and I'll admit it, I said, okay, so Debbie Wasserman Schultz is too corrupt for the Democratic National Committee after the WikiLeaks release of the email documents. So I guess she's not too corrupt for the Hillary Clinton campaign, though, because she is now going to be honorary chairperson. Yeah. So what kind of a message does that send?
Yeah, exactly.
And then you've got people saying, if people go to Jill Stein or some third or alternative or independent candidate, then they're for Donald Trump. Well, no, Donald Trump is the spoiler. And in some people's minds, actually, Hillary Clinton is a spoiler who's been spoiling this whole system to begin with. But people really, I think, need to support shows like yours, alternative media. That's one thing that people have been talking a lot about. And I think really in the end, another thing that's my response too, is I'm just going to keep doing this MTC report up there at YouTube and try to tell the truth as I see it. But a lot of folks have also said to me, you know, what difference does it make if Trump or Clinton win? They're all Wall Street buddies. They go to the same parties. They run in the same circles. I mean, it's as if a long time ago, the three of them, you know, Bill, Hillary, and Donald sat down in a room and said, how do we make this work for everyone? You know, because a lot of
they
folks,
actually have sat down in many rooms, including Donald Trump's wedding room, since the Clintons were invited to Donald Trump. I agree with you there. I mean, obviously there are some economic and social policies that would be vastly different with Trump and Hillary Clinton. But that being said, you know, I think that there are a lot of people, Mark, that are looking at Jill Stein. You know, one of the things that I'm wondering about here is, you know, back in 2000, now 16 years ago, a lot of people were dissatisfied, again, with the Clinton-Gore last 4 years, Monica and everything else. And a lot of people, including, you know, well-known progressives like Michael Moore and others, Chuck D, were supporting Ralph Nader. And in the end, because we didn't want to spoil and give the election to Bush, which eventually happened because he stole it in Florida, is the fact that some people in swing states like Ohio and Florida and other places like that, Pennsylvania, Iowa, would go for Al Gore, and in the states that, you know, he was going to win handily, Gore was, you know, they voted for Ralph Nader, Massachusetts, New York, California, etc. I'm wondering if something similar with Jill Stein could be worked out, because there's, I think, a need, and I think you would agree, Mark, for more parties in this country. That the two parties have become basically occupied by Wall Street, play on words, of course, and therefore, you know, with the exception of the Sanders or the liberal wing of the Democratic Party, there really is no connection to middle class, middle America, and that's why, you know, half the country doesn't even vote anymore. But if you have a couple of other parties, you know, maybe
and I think Jill Stein is going to benefit from this, and she is right now. She's getting a lot more media attention, and she's speaking everywhere right now. So it's definitely been a move towards the Greens, and I have to report that that is true. It's a Bernie or Jill. It was Bernie or bust, the hashtags on Twitter, then it went to Bernie or Jill, and now it's just pretty much Jill.
Interesting.
So, there you go.
Talking with Mark Taylor-Canfield here on the Jeff Santos Show. He is not on Skype today because he is, as you just heard, part of a big day in Seattle where he's DJing and preparing for a bigger event tonight. So we'll get him back on Skype next week. For those of you who like to watch us at jeffsantoshow.com or on FSTV.org or on MNN.org and Channel 34, Channel 33, Time Warner, and Verizon Cable in Manhattan. Let me ask you this, because I think it's important, Mark. You know, I think that we, because of what Bernie has talked about, single-payer health care, 4 years free university, public university, you know, breaking up the big banks, Wall Street reform in general, on and on and on, you know, that there is, I think, a yearning for, particularly from young people, millennials, and maybe up to maybe age 50, you know, who want so much to see the country change in their lifetime. So many people, and I talked to one of our listeners today who did so much in 2008 to see President Obama, you know, get elected. You know, a mandate, you know, he had senators, he had 60 senators. We haven't had that in so long. And all of it came tumbling down, you know, the hiring of Rahm Emanuel and Geithner and Summers and all these corporate Democrats into his economic team. Then, of course, Hillary Clinton being Secretary of State and leading a more conservative, you know, neoliberal foreign policy. And it just seems that there were so many people who were disappointed, Mark. And, you know, is that frustration? Did you see that in Philadelphia that, you know, well, we had hoped with Obama and we were bamboozled? to use his term. And now we are being given the middle finger by a lot of corporate Democrats running the Democratic Party and the Clinton campaign. Is there any disillusionment in terms of, look, no matter where we go in the Democratic Party, we're being met with resistance. We thought that Obama would change, but it didn't happen. We thought that Bernie could overtake Hillary Clinton. That didn't happen. Is there any sort of, now frustration that has sort of boiled over to apathy?
Well, disillusionment is a part of the political process, and everybody realizes that. But I think the problem the Democrats have with the Berniecrats is a lack of trust. That's the issue. It's not so much disillusionment. People are willing to make compromise, and they're willing to move forward in steps, to get where they need to go. But they need to be working with a system and an infrastructure that supports them, and I don't think that the Berniecrats really feel that way. Now, in Seattle, I can tell you that people here are outside of the normal political bubble. We are nowhere near Washington, D.C., or New York, or anywhere on the East Coast establishment. So people here are very independent-minded, and if you talk to the average person or some of the musicians or producers and promoters that I talk to in the music industry, I mean, they just think that both parties are ridiculous. So that's where we're at in Seattle. It's just common knowledge that, if you bring up the subject of the DNC and Bernie Sanders right now, even to people who have been very supportive of him, they just kind of wax philosophical and say, that's the way the two-party system works. And until we have an alternative to that, we're all going to end up feeling held hostage to another George W. Bush or Donald Trump or somebody that can scare the progressives into line, and so they'll salute the DNC. And it's not working very well right now. What I'm worried about is that the Democrats may not be making a good political choice in some of these decisions. It's one thing to have a political agenda that is not respecting the more progressive wing of the party. It's another thing to actually do things in your own self-interest that ends up hurting the party and possibly losing the election. That really is something that people should be talking about in the media. Of course they aren't, because the media is all part of this. The corporate media just loves the horse race, that's what it's all about. It's really exciting, that's what they like.
It's interesting. It is, yes. You're certainly right. I mean, now the big issue is that will Donald Trump back the opponent of Paul Ryan, in the primary in Wisconsin? It's crazy stuff. We'll get with Robert Kraig at that at the next hour. Do you feel that the Green Party
just chose her VP, by the way? Jill Stein just chose her vice presidential candidate. Yeah, that was a breaking story.
Well, what's the news? Who is it, Mark?
Well, we're looking at it right now, but I'll get back to you in a second on that.
Okay, all right, fantastic.
All right,
it's breaking news here on the Jeff Santos Show. Are there Green Party folks that are looking to run for city council in Seattle, run for state rep in greater Seattle Metro? Because to me, this is one of the big issues for those who are thinking of putting all their eggs into the Green Party basket, that the infrastructure behind it is not quite there yet. I know that when we had Jill Stein on, she said there were a few people who were running under that ticket. I'm wondering if you've heard anything like this. The Working Parties family, which our good friends, Democracy for America, have worked closely with in New York in particular. We had a caller actually from New York when I asked the question if they could merge, because I'm wondering, if you could put together a coalition of Bernie supporters with those who are Jill Stein, and Green Party supporters with those who were very active in Zephyr Teach-Out's campaign, which our friends at Badass Teachers and others were very supportive of, Ms. Teach-Out. And of course, gave Andrew Cuomo on the Democratic ticket in the primary a big run, but she's also worked closely with the Working Families ticket as well. So I'm just wondering, have you heard anything about bringing together these smaller parties and maybe forming a bigger progressive party? Any thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, what's been going on, and we've been covering this at Democracy Watch News, has been a major focus of a lot of our weekly press briefings on Thursdays, is that this is an omni-party movement. It's not really about the Greens either. It's not. There are still Democrats that are working with some of these new movements like Brand New Congress. I'm sure you're probably, some of the listeners are probably familiar with Brand New Congress, but it's a movement, basically to, as I'm writing about today in the Capitol Hill Times, a movement to replace the Congress with independent and progressive voices. And so people are moving beyond the Bernie Sanders phenomena into these independent groups, which, just like the People's Convention in Philadelphia, which happened on the weekend before the convention, that was an omni-party event. So you had representatives from a lot of different parties. And we did that in Seattle. I actually helped organize an alternative political convention here a few years ago to just, offer a voice to libertarians and Greens and socialists and, whatever people had to say. It was a free mic. And it was very interesting, the kinds of differences that people were opinionating about, but it was also interesting how people were able to join together on at least particular issues. So when it was approached as a issue-oriented movement, it can work quite well. And I think folks like Jill Stein are used to that idea. And the Green Party, is an international movement, and a lot of their candidates are in parliamentary systems where coalition governments are the norm. So I think that what we're seeing is not necessarily a movement just towards the Greens, but a movement towards all sorts of different alternative parties who might be able to come together. And if they could find a candidate that they could all support, there's actually enough votes out there to get them elected to the White House this year.
Well, think about this, Mark. Half the country doesn't vote. So there are millions of voters out there that you could draw into. I think Sanders did some of it, but you could go even beyond that. So there is something there. And as one of our emailers just said, Steve from California, we need one big, powerful progressive party. And I think that this to me should be the goal. Now, if the Democratic Party wants to turn into that, I'm all for it. But I see a lot of resistance, and watching our good friend Dr. Cornel West the other day, he says, look, this is still a militaristic Democratic Party. This is still a party in which, they're taking money left and right from Wall Street. How is that going to work? I guess that's why he kind of split with Bernie. And I know it wasn't easy for him, and when we talk to him, we'll ask him about, what that separation was like. But your party tonight, my friend. Take care. Ohio, Florida, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Colorado, Nevada, Wisconsin, that people vote for Hillary Clinton. But in the other states, and there's some big states, both electoral college as well as population centers, California, New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, Illinois, all solidly blue, that I believe should be given the opportunity to have a Jill Stein, a Gary Johnson, if the Working Families Party, I don't know this to be the case, has a presidential candidate, to be able to look at and maybe to build up something on the progressive side. One of our listeners, Stephen, said we need one big, powerful political party. I don't know if we're going to be able to attain that, but getting a point to build on that, to me, would be something, to, I think, discuss after Bernie's campaign. Your thoughts on that?
So, this is a very important set of questions. I'm doubtful about traditional third-party activity unless you have a real strategic plan for building a base and power behind it. So I'm open to persuasion if people have better information. I don't see Jill Stein doing that. And by the way, on the libertarian side, anyone who watched the Libertarian Convention will find that is not a very constructive group. I thought that it was bizarre, the positions of many of the candidates, and they were almost like comical. I thought it was like the Saturday Night Live, other than Mr. Johnson. The other presidential candidates on the stage were completely bizarre, and I'm sure people will find it on C-SPAN archives.
I got to see some of it. it was bizarro world for sure.
Yeah. So any comedy for your listeners should look at that. Now, Working Families Party, we're a member of that, and it's been founded in Wisconsin. It's a different strategy. It's not working at the presidential level. I know it did endorse Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. The main focus is electing strong progressives in Democratic primaries for state office, for Congress.
Right.
And so we have a whole number of key races in Wisconsin in the primaries next week in August, where we have movement progressives challenging very conventional establishment Democrats. And as a member of the Working Families Party, we're very engaged in that process. So that's a little bit different than at this point, though it could grow in different directions, than the question over the presidential race. I think, look, it's a process, right? And this is about building power. So we have to sometimes do things that we don't like to do. So even progressives who kind of have a gut kind of gag reaction to supporting Hillary Clinton have to make a pragmatic decision as to, first of all, how do we head off, the real emergence of fascism, which is not campaign hyperbole this year, unfortunately. I mean, there really is it is not hyperbole to say it's an existential threat, Trump being president, right down to him.
I believe. And, it is important, I think, to be able to have leverage in case Hillary Clinton does what Terry McAuliffe said the other day, that, TPP, Hillary Clinton will come around. Now, we talked with Jan Schakowsky on Friday, who was furious on Thursday, actually, after we went off the air, and we played that audio yesterday, Ron, and she is furious. She looks at it as a sexist thing that McAuliffe wouldn't have said this if there wasn't a woman. But I look at it on one side of things, that to me, he is very close and has been very close with Bill Clinton and with Hillary Clinton, his former campaign manager in 2008. A longtime friend of Bill, fundraiser and so forth, obviously the chair of the Democratic National Committee. I think that there's a lot of apprehension, and Evan just talked to Mark Taylor-Canfield, who has been around a lot of Bernie or bust folks. There's a lot of apprehension on Hillary Clinton right now.
Yeah, and I think it's around building up these issues that she's agreed on. Now, TPP is the one where they could not bring themselves on that platform to say they were against the TPP, which is a huge mistake, and create an opening for Trump.
Right.
But at the same time, there's a lot of other good stuff in the platform on trade. There's a straight-up repudiation of NAFTA, of GATT, and an admission that they sold workers down the river in those treaties, and that we need to do them entirely differently. That's in the platform. It'd be a perfect platform plank if it just said, therefore we oppose TPP. Instead it says we will apply these standards to TPP, which is weasel language. And that was the major issue, you were at the convention, that came up on the floor that people were agitated about and carrying signs and stickers about, etc. And so, but it's going to be, I'm not going to say completely easy, but it's going to be quite possible to discredit Trump on this issue. They're already talking a lot about where Trump makes all of his various Trump products. And, of course, none of them are made here that I've heard of.
Including the ties.
And, right. The ties, the furniture. Who knew you could get Trump furniture? And so on and so forth. But this is about issues, and it's about creating a mandate. We have to make sure Hillary wins, and then we need to be in a position to try to make Hillary's presidency as progressive as possible. And we need to think about power here, because if it's about the goodwill of Hillary do the right thing because maybe she's seen the light, that's fuzzy thinking. It needs to be that it's to her advantage as president to go in a progressive direction, and maybe, unlike her husband, and unlike Barack Obama, she will actually enter office realizing that she is not going to make a deal with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell, that they're going to try to destroy her, and that she needs to fight effectively, and the way to fight effectively is to put out real aspirational reforms that you advocate for that would actually improve people's lives, and when they kill them, sweep them out of office 2 years later in the next midterm.
Well, I'm interested in what I think a lot of Bernie supporters are going to do here over the coming weeks and coming months. And I think there's leverage, though, in whether it's a third party or the beginnings of working families, particularly at the lower level, state house, congressional, making some moves here. Let's go to the phones. Talk to John in Minneapolis. You are next with Robert Kraig. John, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I was a Bernie supporter and worked very hard on his campaign here, and we were successful here in Minnesota. And I was disappointed as to, how it played out in other areas of the country. I felt that it was terribly unfair. But I am very afraid of a person like Donald Trump, and I don't want to vote for a spoiler candidate. My wife, on the other hand, will vote for Jill Stein, but, I'm just really, kind of looking at it and thinking they're using me. We had the big kumbaya moment there, with Bernie and Hillary, and it sounds all good, and I want to believe that Hillary has really changed from, last year when she took $750 million or whatever it was that she took from, or $750,000 from Goldman Sachs.
Right.
I'd like to believe that she really has changed. Now, on the other hand, there was a correspondent, Juan Gonzalez, pointed out that a very strong progressive movement within the Democratic Party has brought things like, FDR's New Deal and then the Great Society. Lyndon Johnson was a pretty conservative, old-time Democrat candidate, from the South, and I think he just had a real change of heart. He was willing to be pushed in another direction, and I think within the Democratic Party we do have the Progressive Caucus, and we can, grow that, and maybe we can change the party. I think on a national level, we're stuck with this two-party system until there are substantive changes within the government structure, because, we don't have a parliamentary system. But even in a parliamentary system, you still have to make concessions. And I think that a lot of the very idealistic Bernie supporters are, kind of naive, or, I know that they're dissatisfied. I feel some of that dissatisfaction, too, but I've been around long enough to know you got to kind of, you have to step back and look at the best strategy, not go home and close the door on everything. And I think that there's some of that. I do think that we should work on strengthening alternative parties. Like within this city, we have several people, one person on the city council from the Green Party, and then the park board, which is just as strong as the city council, and we have several people on the park board. I think Socialist Alternative, she never gets any credit for introducing $15 an hour. Look at that. So there's these movements, and I think that we need to really stay engaged. And
let me ask you, John, if I can interrupt. First of all, are you listening to us online or through another platform?
Yeah, no, I'm listening to you online, and I usually listen to Free Speech TV, but I was a bit annoyed the other day when one of the hosts was trying to, he was making excuses for the Democratic Party having a speaker like Michael Bloomberg, who I just think was an absolute disaster, a racist. He is, gentrifying New York. He looks at New York City as his own personal product, luxury product. He's
another 1%. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah,
I don't know who or what said it, but I couldn't agree with you.
I was just cut off. I was not allowed to talk, and I wanted to explain how angry I was I'm originally from New York, and I was just really pissed off at his support, because he was an entrepreneur, and he thought that it was a good strategy to reach out to independents and Republicans. And it's like, I'm sorry, I think they're dying out. Their party is a joke. I don't want to reach out to them. I want to reach out to progressives. And I want to reach out to, people like Jill Stein. So.
Interesting. Let me ask Robert your thoughts, John. It's fascinating to hear how you and your wife are split here on the Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton piece as well. Robert, your thoughts, and it's interesting that John, has these thoughts. It's a first-time caller to the show, it's from I can remember. And I don't know if you've called before, John, or not, but the fact is that, Robert, I think there are a lot of people that are in this sort of mode of not really sure where to go. Your view, Robert?
Yeah, and the caller makes a really good point when he talked about compromise, and that even in a parliamentary system, usually your party can't get a majority, and that some compromise has to be made. Now, and some of the Bernie supporters want purity, right? Want the pure candidate. I think you have to redefine what compromise means. If compromise means compromising our values and what we're ultimately trying to achieve, then absolutely, that should never happen. But there are going to need to be tactical moves in order to get in that direction. So we might well be in a situation, since we don't, if you think about two possible worlds, a Donald Trump world, where quite frankly, we're worried about we're totally different concerns than under a Hillary Clinton administration, right? I mean, the question of stability and basic...
Kraig, and taking your calls and talking with a first-time caller from Minnesota, John, who is, a divided couple, both who are supporters of Bernie Sanders. He is now supporting Hillary Clinton, at least he was before the call, and his wife is supporting Jill Stein. John, I don't know if the conversation that we've been having and the back and forth that Robert Kraig of Wisconsin Citizen Action has helped you at all, but I'm wondering, if there is a point that you are going to either say, all right, look, our votes will cancel out, honey, or I'm going to have to go with you, or you're going to have to go with me, or is it just going to stay as it is, John?
I think it's just going to stay as it is. My wife has very formidable opinions, and she is not going to be easily swayed. I think maybe it's her German background or something.
Okay, all right.
But I'm just much more practical, and, as much as I would love to, have Jill Stein as president, or, the Green Party platform as, the platform of the party in power, I guess you could say. I just know it's not going to happen, and I'm really afraid of Donald Trump. I think that he appeals to a lot of people, even around here in a blue, so-called blue state, and I think in North and South Dakota, outstate Minnesota, they call it outstate, so the rural areas of Minnesota. I mean, even though we're a blue state, we're carried by 3 cities, and we have for, since 1945. That carries it for the Democratic, they call it the Democratic Farmer Labor Party, which was progressive.
DFL, yeah, right.
Yeah. And we've fielded, some great liberal candidates over, half a century or so, here. And I'm not from Minnesota, but I very much admire the political history of it. But, the DFL party was very antagonistic towards us Bernie people from the very beginning. It's just so ironic because when we first were campaigning, we had a person loaned from Keith Ellison, who is another great liberal, like Paul Wellstone was. It's like who do you think made this party? Look at the wall there. And this was down at the party headquarters. We were using their phoning, stuff, and they were kind of rude to us. And you could tell we very warily allowed us to use their stuff until we eventually had our own headquarters, in several places, and it quickly came together. But it's I just. Like I said, I'm very skeptical when they put on, somebody like Bloomberg. I don't want to reach out to the Republicans. That's the whole problem. That has how the party has been yanked over, to the right-wing side. I mean, I've been, voting Democrat all my life, and you could see once Jimmy Carter was out of the way and Ronald Reagan was president, the whole party just moved and, gradually over to their side. And it's just gotten weirder and weirder. And, Bernie Sanders, his issues should have gotten a lot more press before that, but we don't really have free speech in this country, unfortunately.
Yeah, we don't have progressive media either, or a combination
and so
of
you shouldn't have to run for president to make a point. But I think that he was willing to do that. I think he knew possibly he wasn't going to win, and I appreciate the people I worked with. They were wonderful, lots of young people. It really has energized, politics, and even my own politics. I was getting very cynical. So I think it was a good thing. I wish that, there was more press for third parties, and I think that they should get very involved, either supporting progressives within the Democratic Party or supporting House congressional people in state legislatures, city councils and things like that. And then they can maybe change the political discourse of the country. We have just gone, so far to the right. It's ridiculous. I mean, we don't even come close to the most conservative, countries in Europe, like say Austria. I mean, or some of these, countries that have, health care, universal health care and things like that. And we don't
Sweden,
have that.
Finland, right? No, I hear you. Let me, John, just if you might, Robert, when you heard about what the DFL was doing to Bernie supporters, did you see that in Wisconsin from your perch there in Milwaukee? Were there insiders in the Wisconsin Democratic Party, trying to prevent Bernie supporters from organizing? Of course, he won big there, so maybe, and obviously he won big in Minnesota too on the caucus level. What did you see, Robert, from your vantage point, in terms of how Bernie supporters and the institutional Democrats treated Bernie and his team?
The Bernie campaign was able in Wisconsin simply to come in and do their own thing and not have to rely on any Democratic Party resources. So you didn't see that particular conflict, but you saw a lot of tension lines. You saw a lot of pressure on elected officials to endorse Hillary. You saw a lot of kind of Facebook shaming of some of the leading Bernie supporters and back and forth going on. There's been a bigger issue at the state level where some progressive challengers of the Bernie stripe or Working Family Party supported have been denied access to the voter file, and so that's a fight over resources. But there is kind of an established part of the party that thinks that they own the party and that it belongs to them, and I think you saw that tension a lot, not just like in Wisconsin, Minnesota, but throughout. And I think that in a two-party system, it needs to be like what happened in the Republican Party, where the right simply took over the Republican Party step by step. I think progressives need to do the same in the Democratic Party, and I think that's entirely possible right now, especially when you throw in the ingredient that Bernie Sanders is able to outraise Hillary Clinton all with clean money, which shows if you have a compelling candidate who speaks to people's issues and their aspirations, you don't need all the dirty money and the dark money.
That's a very good point. John, again, I hope we helped, and I hope you keep in contact. We're looking to have Dr. Cornel West, who's a big now Jill Stein supporter, obviously one of the first supporters to come out for Bernie Sanders, and I think probably his first African American supporter, if I'm not mistaken. That Bernie Sanders had. So,
is he going to be on tomorrow?
We're looking to do it, and matter of fact, we've been texting back and forth. So I'm hoping to do it as soon as tomorrow, if not over in the next week or so, to get Dr. West.
Yeah, I'd love to hear his take on it. I have a lot of respect for him. I really like him, but I still, I'm going to support Hillary and try to change the party from within. That's what my goals are.
Well, John, I appreciate your call. I appreciate the first time making the effort to do so, and look forward to hearing you again. And, I think you're doing the right thing, my friend. So thank you very much for calling, and look forward to hearing from you again.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. It's interesting. A fellow Midwesterner, Robert, and our last caller, John, there. And I wonder if, there is a lot of people who have these divided families, husband, wife, son, daughter, father maybe with Hillary, and the daughters with Bernie, so on and so forth. It's a good thing if it is. I mean, not that we want to have strife in the family. There's enough strife already out there. But I think that kitchen table conversation. I went to see the Norman Lear movie the other day, and of course you think back to the All in the Family. He was the creator of, and those conversations that Rob Reiner, of course now a famous director, meathead character, and Archie Bunker had were amazing. You don't really have those sort of discussions in a lot of primetime television today. So I'm glad in a way that there is this sort of, I would say, light tension, in John's family. On that matter, because I think that's what you need, because you just can't sort of just kind of go along to get along.
I think that it's happening not only within families, my family in particular, but within, say, the family of Citizen Action in Wisconsin, my organization. In fact, our lead Latino organizer, Lou Sosa, was a very, very strong Bernie supporter, and she took the courageous step at the People's Action Delegates Assembly in Milwaukee this week of declaring herself that she will vote for Hillary, which was very hard for her to say, but she was making a strategic decision that our best chance to move progressive policy and values forward was to get Hillary elected and then keep pushing her. And that there's no possibility of any progressive outcome under a Trump presidency. So I think there's conversations happening a lot. I can say within my personal family, it kind of breaks down between whether you're a swing state or not. In other words, like you were suggesting earlier, Jeff, that people who feel in Illinois, for example, who feel that their vote actually isn't going to impact the presidential outcome, feel a lot more free to support Jill Stein than someone living in Wisconsin, just for example.
Exactly. No. I mean, I think you're exactly right. And I think there needs to be that kind of discussion, because, when you look at kind of building the progressive issues, and to have that kind of platform, and at the same time, you don't want to see Donald Trump, win in Ohio as an example, because he's close there, and the TPP issue is going to be a vital issue. I think those are issues in which I believe, you need to have strength in numbers, and I think it's really, really important to do just that. And I'm hoping that people can build, whether it's the Green, and again, I would love to see leaders of the working family parties and Jill Stein and the Green Party, think about some kind of merger or some kind of ability to communicate on the same lines. Because if as you are indicating, that there is already in Wisconsin and presumably already in New York, that's 2 states, working with yourself and another group like Democracy for America, that is a good sign, and they should be able to, bring in other groups, and whether it's, whether they all go into the working families, they all go into Green, or there's a merger, whatever, call it green-blue. I don't know, but the fact is that there needs to be something there that, again, I think challenges the Democratic wing, and I just think that should be something that Democrats and progressives should discuss. And again, I think it would only make Hillary Clinton, take notice that she can't, go back to triangulation, that she can't go back to talking, Republican light, because, she'll lose and she'll probably have a challenge like they did in 1968 with McCarthy and then Kennedy to Johnson before Johnson withdrew, like they did in 1980 with Ted Kennedy and Jimmy Carter. And nobody wants that. And of course, both Carter lost and Johnson didn't even run. So it just goes to show you, if you have that kind of, leverage, then, you have something to deal with. And, so.
Yeah, I agree. And Working Families Party is a little bit different model in that it, except in states like New York that have fusion, where you can vote, have two different party lines.
Right.
States like Wisconsin, the Working Families Party only works within the Democratic Party, trying to elect progressives in Democratic primaries, and that's the predominant model as it is spread out. So that's still very different than the Green Party, which is trying to win on its own ballot line, which is a much harder thing to do than to simply try to take over the Democratic Party primary by primary, especially in progressive areas. We have a lot of state legislators, a lot of members of Congress that ought to be a lot more progressive than they are. So the same dynamic that occurred in the Republican side, where you can't be too far right in these gerrymandered districts, actually is true in the flip side, but progressives are not taking enough advantage of that fact in primaries. And so it's a little bit of a different model, but it does create an alternative center of gravity, and we saw what Bernie essentially did. Particularly since the whole DNC was against him, since we now know, courtesy of the Russians, right? He essentially created a third party within the Democratic Party. It was temporary for the time being, but it could be a permanent political revolution, as Bernie likes to call it. But that's the question as to how we move forward. The caveat would be this, as far as your kind of scenario, if Hillary is elected, does bad, and gets challenged from the left in 4 years, is, Thomas Frank in his new book, Listen Liberal, argues that Bill Clinton was worse than a George Bush Sr. or a Bob Dole would have been, because he got things done that Democrats would have never allowed them to do if they had tried to do it as a Republican. So that welfare reform and NAFTA and the crime bill were kind of like Nixon to China kind of moments where only a Democrat could do it. So if it turns out that way, if we do everything right and we still lose control of Hillary, then you do really see an Elizabeth Warren candidacy potentially in 4 years. And I could see Hillary being knocked off in 4 years if that happened with a strong progressive challenger.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. And, we had Thomas on the show on Thursday. And, he was talking, and laughing at the same time, about where we are in the Democratic Party. And, the fact that, it took Bernie Sanders to sort of move this party, where it has been over the last 30 years. And he has written about it, not only in what's about Kansas, but his latest book as well. But I mean, there's a real need here. And, the last caller, John, brought up the fact that, after Jimmy Carter lost in 1980, the party constantly moved to the right. Whether you look at, even somebody who I admire quite a bit, a mentor to me, Michael Dukakis, ran a very, middle of the road campaign, general election campaign. Bill Clinton
we have unfortunately been blinded by lack of media interest in how we have gone off of course. I got about 30 seconds to commercial and come back and finish it up if you want to start then, Josh, because to me, this opportunity, I believe, is something that we need to explain to the American people, that we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to continue the wheel going from where it was in the 40s, 50s, and 60s in the 20th century in America. We're right back. Right. It's the Jeff Santos Show. Back in a flash.